Hello, today I'm going to install 12-volt magnetic locks to my lower cupboards, the ones that are underneath my countertop and underneath my sink. I previously installed these 12-volt magnetic locks to my overhead cupboards, and I've got a bit of interest out of them, so I thought I'd show you how these are fitted. So let's get into it. So before I get into installing these, I just want to talk you through just how this works in my van. So this is specific to my van, but you can adapt it to work in yours. So I have these 12-volt magnetic locks and a plate here on the top on the cupboard, so that when it comes down and I turn the ignition key on, this closes and won't open again until I turn off the ignition. So it stops anything from flying out as I'm driving around. The way it's energized, I have a switched ignition live that comes from the cab to the back of the van. So at the back of the van, I have a rear view facing camera, and I have this running all of the time. I used to tow my motorbike behind the van when I was driving. I couldn't actually see it in my mirrors, so I was a bit worried that I'd lost my motorbike. So I put the camera there so I can see. It acts like a rear view mirror basically. So I have a wire that goes all the way through, and then I've connected that to a relay. So the wire energizes the relay, and then from my leisure batteries underneath the seat, the power comes up through the relay, comes to the magnets, and that's what clicks them on. But it just saves me having to go around and make sure all of the cupboards are actually locked before I drive away. Sod's law, you forget to do one and everything just piles out as you're driving around. So that's how it works. So I'm going to show you basically behind my control panel. It's a bit of a mess, a bit of a rat's nest, but it's not meant to be pretty, it's not meant to be seen. So I'll show you, basically taking the cable through into the cupboards and then installing them in the doors. So less talking, more doing. So here we are. This is the cupboard I'm going to start with. I've got 3 to do, but I'm just going to show you this one. So this is the magnet. Comes with an aluminium bracket, a little wire with 2 tails, a positive and a negative. So this is going to be installed on the inside of the cupboard, on this side, and then we've got the plate that basically is the gets attached to the magnet when the magnet's energized. So this is going to go on the door here, and obviously I'm going to have to line the 2 up and find a convenient way to not interact with my my little leather handle here. So yeah, that's basically what it's going to look like. It'll be there on the inside of the door, and then this will be on the inside of the cupboard, and then the cables will run underneath the kitchen counter, and then down and through the little conduit where I've got most of my cables crossing the van. I did it like that so I could have access to it after I built the vans for occasions such as this. So a bit of forward planning I think has helped me in this. Okay, so this is the cupboard that I'm going to be working on today. So here's the magnet. This is going to go on the inside of the cupboard wall here somewhere, probably in that direction. You can't see that, but the magnet facing out, so that when it's energized, it will grab hold of this, and this will be on the inside face of the door. So I need to line these 2 up, so that when the door shuts, the magnet's energized and it holds the door firmly in place. This is the cupboard that we keep most of our food in, so I certainly don't want our food coming out onto the floor as we're driving around. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this positioned on the door. That's where I think this is the most crucial element to get right, because I do have a slight overlap here with the side of the cupboard, so I just need to get this positioned in the right place for the magnet, and then I can line the magnet up afterwards. I think that's the approach I'm going to go for. I just hope it works. So anyway, less talking, more doing. Okay, so I've marked on the door where I want this plate to go, and in the fixing kit comes one of these. Now these are actually for security, for door entry systems and that sort of thing. So yeah, this goes through the door. Obviously, it's not got any way of putting a screwdriver on it because it's meant to be for security. So these are a bit thick for my door actually. So I don't know if you can see, but the thread actually comes well past the inside of the door. So I'm going to have to cut this down using an angle grinder. So I'll do that off camera. I think that's probably safest. So the next thing I need to do is select a drill bit. So if you're not very confident with drills, all you've got to do really is just take the shank of the drill and just offer it up to the thickness of what you're trying to put through. So if you want a through hole, which is what I want this to pass through the material I'm going into, I need this to be basically the same width as this. So I just tend to just put them together and just use my fingers just to feel how, they're smooth. So, so if you pick something that's undersized, this is quite drastic obviously, you can see that, you know, this isn't going to go through that hole. So, but I'm going to start off with a smaller drill bit, just to drill a pilot hole. Then I'm going to go through this 10mm drill bit afterwards. So let's give that a go next. So this is the pilot hole. So it's went nice and gentle there. If you are worried about the other side of the wood splitting, you can put a piece of sacrificial wood on the other side and just clamp it to whatever it is you're drilling. That way it keeps the fibres of the wood intact, and it then goes into the sacrificial wood a bit. Otherwise you can find that the fibres of the wood do sort of blow out a bit, and that's when you get all that splintering. So I'm just being careful, but if you want to do that, that's probably the right way to do it. But I don't profess to be a woodworking channel, so here we go. So there we go, that's my hole through now. So I'm just going to test that my fixing goes through. Which, embarrassingly, it doesn't. So I'm going to go up a size. Remember, you can always go up a size, you can't go down a size. So here's an 11mm drill bit. So we'll just swap that out on my drill. And this should allow me to get this to go through. Can't always get it perfect every time. So there we go. That's the 11mm was the right size, was the key size for this through. So as you can see, this now comes beyond the width of the door. So if I was to attach this now, this would be off the face of the door. So I now need to mark this and cut it with an angle grinder. So I'll do that off camera, and then I'll come back with this a bit shorter, and we'll carry on. Okay, so I've cut this down. This is the bit that goes through the door. So this is now the same thickness as the door. I've also included this like plastic washer. It's like a soft rubbery washer, because the head of this has got a serration on it to stop it from spinning, but I'm going to try with the rubbery washer. I've also had to cut down the screw that comes with this, that goes into the fixing that goes through the door, because this was a lot longer. So bear in mind that this might not be threaded all the way, the thread might not go all the way down to the bottom of the fixing. So let's see if we can get this installed. This is now flush with the door, so the plate can now be fitted to it. So there we go, that's all tightened up nice and snug. So let's give the door a shut, and you guys let me know if this actually fits. Okay, so as you can see, this sits just nicely, just up against this wall here, just in the right place for us to put the magnet, so that when I turn on the ignition, the door will lock and this will engage. Next thing for me to do is to work out the position of this magnet. So I've got the magnet now mounted to the side of the cabinet, so when the door shuts, this plate now comes up against the magnet. So all that's left now is to connect the electrical side of it. Now I guess this is probably the bit that you guys are more interested in, because this is just literally screwing things to and drilling holes. So yeah, let's work on getting some electricity to here. I won't show you the whole routing of the cable because it's not really specific to your van, but I'll show you what I've done in the way of switching it via a relay, and then hopefully that will give you the confidence to apply it to your own van. Okay, so let's come out of the cupboard and we'll go to the electrical panel. I'll take the cover off, and we'll have a look behind there and see how it's all wired. Okay, so I've just taken the panel off inside my toilet cupboard, and this exposes all the wiring and everything that's behind the control panel. So let's go and have a look. So as you can see, this is the main cable that comes all the way down and goes to the bottom of my van. So this is what the fridge and the light, some of the lighting and various bits that basically don't go up and towards the rear or towards the front. This is basically like the main bus that goes through the van. Just here is a little solid state relay. So I've got a wire that comes from the front of the van to the back of the van, and there's a wire here that basically activates the relay, and this is what sends signals off to the magnetic locks to actually get them to lock. So what I'm going to do basically is add another cable to these terminals, feed it down the main bus along the bottom of the van and into my lock, so that when I turn on my ignition key, this solid state relay triggers, and yeah, the cupboard locks along with the other ones. So I'll get this wired up and then I'll show you, and you can see what I've done. Okay, so now I've run the cables to the solid state relay, I can talk you through the system. So if you're not familiar with the way a relay works, you have an energized wire. So basically this is your ignition live, your switch live, and if you put it on a switch, this is what gives power to the relay. And then you also have a ground wire. So you can see there's a plus there and a negative there. So that's your incoming, that's your input, that's what tells the relay to come on. So when it senses voltage, depending on what voltage your relay is, so this one's a 12 volt, I think it's got, this one's, you can use between 3 and 32 volt to trigger the relay, and then you've got your power coming in, and the power that you want to be switched, and then your power going out. So this can control between 5 and 80 volts DC. So one of the things I like about this, about a solid state relay, is that this one's actually got a varying voltage. So modern vans, sometimes you find a switch live that starts off at 12 volts, but it actually drops down to a lower voltage. So actually being able to use between 3 and 32 volts means you can actually use a step down voltage rather than having to look for a constant 12 volt live, a constant ignition live, which they're becoming more difficult to find on modern vans. On older vans like turn of the century or 90s vans, 80s vans beyond, earlier than that, quite often it was just a switch 12 volt. But with CAN bus and other things, it can be more difficult to find a switched 12 volt live. If you are struggling to find one, I'd say plug a phone charger into the cigarette lighter socket, and just turn the ignition on and off and see if your phone charges, because quite often they're a good source for a switch live, and they've got quite a high fuse rating as well. So yeah, so I've got one wire going to 3 wires now. That's going to the cupboards on this side of the van and the other side of the van, as well as a wire down to the cupboards under the sink. So I've got my positive, and then my negative goes over to my main negative junction block. Because I've got DC-DCs, I've got one here that converts 12 volts to 24 volts for my wastewater pump, and I've also got one that keeps a constant 12 volts. I have a separate negative side of my system which goes through that bus bar. Well, it actually goes through the bus bar over there, and then that one is battery voltage. So I sort of run separate systems within my van. So I started off with a 24 volt system, and then I dropped down to a 12 volt system afterwards. I changed my mind. But some of the things I've got actually still run on 24 volts, so I have a converter here, which actually I need to move because the voltage drop means that the pump doesn't run properly. So that's an overview of the relay. It's not the prettiest of areas of my van, that's for certain, but luckily it gets covered up and you don't really see it. If I hadn't made this video, you would never have seen it. You'd have seen the prettier side of the van. So what I've got to do next is cut the cable to length and connect it to the magnet and then test it. So we'll go back into the cupboard. Okay, here we are back in the cupboard. Favourite space I bet. So I've got the end of my cable here, and I'm going to strip it. I'm just going to talk you through. If you've not done crimps before, then if you've not done a lot of electrical, then I'd highly recommend one of these wire strippers. You literally just put your wire in and then pull and it strips. They're fantastic. So easy as that. There you go. That just pops off, leaving me my 2 wires. So I've used 2 core cable. So my blue is my positive and the brown is my negative. So I just need to strip those. There we go. See, so simple. Get a perfect, I was going to say a perfect strip every time, but I'm sure someone will twist that. Removes the insulation perfectly every time to the length you want it. So there we go. I've got my 2 exposed wires there. I've got 2 exposed wires here. I think I'm just going to strip those a little bit more, just to give myself a bit more bit more working room. See, the thing with vans is you really have to be good at working. You have to be like a contortionist. You have to be comfortable working in really small spaces. Just on the red one, but not the black one. Oh, yeah, these have been soldered. Let's trim this. There we go. Got a bit more copper to, a bit more wire to work with here. So I like to twist the ends of my wires just to stop them from fraying when I put them into the crimp. Okay, so I've got 2 butt connectors. So I'm just gonna put this into my crimp tool and then just crimp this onto one side of that, onto the negative side. Give it a little tug, make sure it works, make sure it's connected properly. Here comes the positive. These can be a little bit fiddly, so just go with it. There we go, little tug, just to make sure they're nice and home and snug. So now I need to put these wires into the corresponding side. So brown is my negative, so that goes to the black side. Put that in there, that one's in. And then if you're working with short tails, like short bits of wire, this bit can be really tricky. Trying to get the second crimping can be a right pain. So give yourself a bit of working room. You see how I'm having to sort of bend that round. The wires don't like to flex too much, so there we go, crimp that one in. So that's my wires connected. The magnet's up, the plate's on the door. So before I pin this up out of the way, just to make it look all pretty and keep it out of the way of us using the cupboard, I'm just going to go and switch the ignition on and just make sure that it actually works, because I don't want to try and finish the job and find actually the thing's not working. So it's always good just to test it at this point. So I'm going to leave you guys in the cupboard. I hope you're not afraid of the dark, but I'll be back in a second and I'll let you know how it gets on. Okay, so the test was successful, so that's good to know. It's really hard to show you, other than the door locked and I couldn't get in and get you guys out until I undid the ignition. One thing to note is I've got a spare plate here because I've got another lock to do, but this needs to cover the full face of the magnet. So when you're locating your magnet and the plate on your door, you just need to make sure that you account for the little aluminium bracket, because this needs to line up fully with the magnet, otherwise it won't work. If it's off ever so slightly, it just won't lock, and that'll be one of the problems. So you'll just have to, if you do find that, you'll just have to move your plate on your door a bit, just to make sure that it actually works, it actually lines up. So that's it from me for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments or you have any advice for anyone else doing this, please do leave it in the comment section below. Please do hit like and subscribe to the channel to see any future videos that are coming out, and hit the notification bell. And I will see you next time.